Because of Jack London's vivid writing in the novel The Call of the Wild, Buck seems to be almost human rather than a mere dog. Buck's adventures make exciting reading. Also, notice the characteristics of Buck. It is similar to that of a human being, and we will discuss that further when we deal with the literary type of naturalism. Let's think about the details of how Buck is taken from the Miller Ranch, and let's explain Buck's reactions to that. We have to realize this was during the time of the Great 49er Expedition. Gold was what everyone wanted, and that was found right now at the time of this novel, north in Alaska. So there's a great demand for St. Bernards for sled dogs during this gold rush. So they would do anything that they could to get dogs. So a workman on the ranch, if you remember, he steals Buck in order to sell him and make a little tidy profit. Buck is taken to the railroad station, hears the exchange of money, and feels a rope being tied so tightly around his neck that he loses consciousness. This also is dealing with the theme of greed in human beings. He is savagely treated by his abductors, who keep him locked in a crate. Buck's instincts and hatred of the men who deal with him cause him, meaning Buck, to lash out and attack them. His wrath is fanned to fever pitch because he is denied food and water for 2 days. Here is the theme of control. Humans wanting control in nature. Buck becomes a red-eyed devil by the time he is turned over to his first owner. After being abruptly taken from his sheltered environment with Judge Miller, his spoiled lifestyle, in the end, Buck never returns to civilization again. He encounters many experiences and dangers and realizes at the end of the novel who he truly is. Let's look at the relationship between John and Buck. John Thornton. Thornton was the first human being that treated Buck well. He had an affection for him, Buck did, since he left the Miller Ranch, because all other human beings that he had encountered were brutal to him. But Thornton wasn't like that. Twice, Buck saves Thornton's life. He once wins more than $1,000 for him on a bet for Thornton by carrying a 1,000-pound load on the ice. That was discussed and read in chapter 6. Thornton, by carrying 1,000 pounds, or when Buck finds Thornton killed later towards the end of the novel, and when he's killed by Indian arrows, he attacks the Indians, killing many of them out of revenge and out of love for the one person that he did really have a true passionate bond with. Remember, we talked about passion, and there's 2 types of passion. This is not the romantic passion, but the passionate, deep, honest love between 2 individuals, one being a dog and the other being a man. So, what do Buck's dreams of the primitive man symbolize throughout this story? Well, they represent the humans and animals in a primitive era. We talked about this way back and before man civilized, when they lived in caves and they were one with nature. Buck has deep ancestral memories of this. And civilization then, so it's only a thin covering of his true primitive nature. So as Buck dreams more and more, the distance between his past and present is narrowed. In a broader sense, the dream shows the primitive roots of humans as well. London seems to be saying that civilization is very fragile, perhaps even useless, for the real and basic concerns of humankind. And the issue of greed and control again plays into this. What does the abandoned camp symbolize after Thornton's death? Well, the camp, where they all once stayed, shows the triumph of nature over human materialism. The men who came seeking gold have been destroyed, and their treasure, which again symbolizing greed, is gradually being spread back over the earth. The sacks are rotting, the gold is seeping out, it's returning back to its natural state, and the entire camp is overrun with weeds and long grasses. Civilization's values, gold and wealth, again the theme of greed, are useless in the natural or the real world. Again, naturalization. So what is the significance of this book title, Call of the Wild? Well, in The Call of the Wild, the author, Jack London, he shows that civilization is restraining and competitive, control, greed. Buck can be no more than a pampered pet in civilized society, and he's taken from his master because of greed and competition, power. Once Buck is in the wild or uncivilized world, he answers the call of the wild, of a magnificent and pure state of nature. So some things about naturalism that you should always remember when reading authors who write in this mode, this literary device, this literary style. The term naturalism describes a type of literature that attempts to apply scientific principles of objectivity and detachment to its study of human beings. Their characters, they're frequently but not invariably ill-educated, or lower-class characters whose lives are governed by the forces of heredity, instinct, and passion. Here, Buck the dog was taken away to be among these ill-educated and lower-class characters. He was in an upper-class society, but taken to be in with the ill-educated of the gold miners, the lower-class citizens, the roughnecks, the untamed wild. So that's what Buck's character is based upon. He is also the brute within, because the brute within each individual is composed of strong and often warring emotions. Again, passions such as lust, greed, or the desire for dominance or pleasure. Here with Buck, he was sold for greed. The men on their adventure in Alaska also had the greed, the lust for gold, the power, the money. They wanted to dominate. They dominated the dogs. The dogs themselves had a dominance, had a certain order, and it was all displayed through their relationships. Also, the fight for survival. The dogs fought for survival amongst their pack. The men fought for their survival amongst their kind. So the conflict in naturalistic novels is often man against nature, but in this particular story, it is an animal against nature, being controlled by man. We also have man against himself. Buck is that man. He is against himself, trying to adapt to becoming one with the Nile, or one with the wild. And he struggles with this. To retain the veneer of civilization, because at one time he kept thinking about his past and wanting to be the spoiled lapdog that he was. And so those are the three main things that you should remember about naturalism and how they apply to the story of Buck and the Call of the Wild. These notes that we discussed will be on the test, so take those into consideration and review these slides because there will be an essay.